Good morning, everybody. It is currently 4:51 a.m. and I am about to start the 3-hour trek to Long Island to pick up something very special. Stay tuned.
3 hours later.
Hey everybody, sorry about that little tease, but not a big fan of filming and driving. Do I have a surprise for you though? Check this out. We picked up some goodies today. A couple little projects that should help pass the time a little bit. So what my goal with these is to start a little series that I like to call quick flips. And that's basically showing you guys how you can take something like these motorcycles and get them running again, fix them up, and get them down the road, someone else to enjoy, and make a little money on the side. But do it quickly, all right? My goal is to have at least one, if not both of these done in 4 weeks. Let's give it a month and just see if we can do it. So the first thing that we are going to do before we even touch these is we are going to give them a bath. They've been in a barn for a long time, and even though they were in the back of the truck on a 4+ hour drive, they are still pretty dirty. So rather than deal with all that, getting my hands all dirty, getting my clothes all dirty, we're just going to take them up to the car wash that's down the road and rinse them off a little bit. All right, so let's check out what we actually got today. This first one right here, this is a 1972 Honda CL350, and its twin over here is a 1972 Honda CB350. You can tell it's a CL not only because of the VIN, but also the high pipe design, whereas the CB, which is more of the street versus the enduro version, has the low swept pipes. Overall, condition is not bad for 50+ years. As you can see, at some point, somebody painted it with this translucent paint that unfortunately doesn't look like it's very gas friendly. So that's something that we're gonna have to deal with eventually. So whenever I'm going out and I'm looking for a bike to pick up to flip, I kind of have a little checklist of things that I like to go over. Firstly is basically most difficult to fix to least difficult to fix. In most cases, most difficult to fix is going to be, does the engine turn? Now, the previous owner, he told me that he did drain both of these, both fluids, engine oil and gas. So that's something to be mindful of. But the first thing I do when I come, I check and I try spinning it over by hand. That's actually very hard to turn over, which I'm happy about. It means we got some compression. Same thing over here for this guy. Turns over. It's just very hard to do by hand. So if the engine's free and if it's a Honda, you got about a 95% chance that it's actually going to run. Things you should pay attention to: if the engine does turn over, you want to listen for that compression of the engine. You want to feel it get harder to turn so that we know that our engine is actually generating compression rather than it just spinning over. There's a difference between a motor that turns and a motor that'll run. The motors were stuck. I probably would not have touched these. I have the abilities to rebuild these engines. I just don't have the facilities to do it anymore. I don't have the tools to do it anymore. And I don't feel like sending stuff out, waiting a while, and then it come back. When doing projects like this, you need to know your abilities, okay? You know, doing a top end on an engine isn't for everybody, especially 4-strokes like this. A 2-stroke, not too bad. You don't have to deal with valves. You don't have to deal with cams. You don't have to deal with cam chains and all that fun stuff. 2-stroke, slap it on, slap it off. Most of the time you're good. These engines though, much more complicated. So know your abilities, know your limits. If an engine is stuck and you don't have access to a machine shop, get ready to spend some money because it ain't cheap. After I check the engine, generally the next thing I'll do is I will check the gas tank. Gas tanks on these old Hondas, they're made out of steel. After 50 some odd years, sometimes well kept in a garage, sometimes left out in a field, steel will rust because, well, water. So one thing I always do is I like to check the tanks. So you can see here that this tank at some point, no, that's not goop or mud or anything. This tank has actually been lined with what looks like cream. And I'm pretty sure that this one has, oh, gotta push it down, come on. This one has too, albeit I'll say this one looks like a lot better job. A tank that has been lined is not the end of the world. I've done it myself plenty of times. Now, I personally don't prefer the cream or the Caswell. I'm a Pour 15 man myself. I've never had anything go bad with Pour 15. I like it because it's single stage. You don't have to mix it. There's less that can go wrong, and Pour 15 is one of the most recognizable brands in the industry. Now, if these tanks weren't lined, what we'd be looking for is nice, clean metal. If the metal in there was showing maybe a little bit of surface rust, things like that, not a big deal. We can get that out. Heavily rusted, we got to start picking and choosing our battles here. Heavily rusted can be fixed with the proper chemicals, tools, things like that. But one thing I've ran into in the past is with a tank that's heavily rusted, once we start removing that rust on the inside, we are actually pretty much removing what metal was left, and we could end up with pinholes that would actually allow gas to seep through. I've seen it before. I've had tanks before where the only thing holding the gas in was the paint itself. As soon as you remove that, drip, 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 there goes the gas. Now you need to either fix the tank or get a new tank. New tanks for these from Honda, not available. There are some aftermarket companies that do make tanks that work with these. Depends on how much money you want to spend. Hopefully for us, they did a good job lining these tanks. Otherwise, removing this liner is a royal pain. It's almost worth it just to buy a new tank at that point. So after checking the engine, after checking the tank, that's usually when I make my decision on whether or not I'm going to make a purchase. For me, both of these checked out just fine. I'm not really too worried about either of them. So the next thing I do is I kind of start doing the nitpicky stuff, maybe the tire kicker stuff. I like to check to see throttle moves, very nice. It means that some of our throttle stuff isn't froze up. These are CV style carbs, so it's less likely that they would be stuck. If this was a slide carb and we went to twist the throttle and it doesn't move, there could be some issues there, whether the actual throttle cable itself is all gummed up or the slides are stuck in the carbs. These are things that we got to pay attention to. Throttle cables, not terribly expensive. These are, I do believe, a 1 into 2 style, which may make it a little bit more difficult. Actually, these Hondas, I think, are a single style. I'm thinking of the 175s. So anyways, after checking the throttle, I'm also going to check like all the other little ancillary stuff. We got good looking glass on the speedometers, nice and bright on the red for the tach. That's something you want to pay attention to. Make sure this isn't too sun faded. 1, 2, 3, 4 blinkers. 1, 2, 3, 4 blinkers. It's got the mirrors. Overall, both these bikes are pretty complete. On these older Hondas, I like to check the exhaust, look for holes, look for rust spots, because once again, 50-year-old chrome doesn't really hold up all that much. You can see here on the CL, the mufflers have actually been replaced at some point. This did come with some stock parts, and I know that the stock muffler setup is in there and it is really rusty. So someone at some point got rid of it and put on these nice little mufflers. They look all right on there. I'm not going to complain about it. Going down the list, we also can't forget, we want to make sure our levers are moving, brake feels good, brake down here feels good. I'm sure the brake pads themselves need to be replaced, but clutch, ooh, that one sticks a little bit. Hear that? We can fix that. That moves. Looks like our brake switch wire right here is busted. That's not a big deal. Fortunately for us, a lot of these parts for these bikes are remanufactured, they're repop. We can get new aftermarket parts. We can even get some parts from Honda itself, actual like OEM stuff, for quite a few bits. I mean, we're not going to get a tank, you know, we're not going to get a speedometer, but everything else, you know, we can get aftermarket. We can see that these handlebars got some nice rust spots. If we wanted this to look good, we just buy some new handlebars, you know, aftermarket, who cares? Same thing, our mirrors. If we don't like our mirrors, let's put something else on there. You know, there are a ton of options for us when it comes to getting these bikes back on the road. So like I said at the beginning of the video, kind of the whole point of this little video series that I'm trying to do here is to show you guys that with the right tools, you can make it happen, okay? It is so much fun working on these. To take something that hasn't fired, that hasn't lived for so long, and bringing it back to life is super satisfying. And it's also a great way to kill time, to spend some time outside, to learn new stuff. I mean, at some point, we're probably going to talk about like Bernoulli's principle when it comes to carburetors. And at the end of the day, when we're doing quick flips, it's all about making money. These bikes right here, we should make a fairly decent amount on. I bet you we can sell one for the price that we paid for both. So we either get ourselves a free bike, or we've basically doubled our initial investment. So stay tuned, be patient. These videos take a while, and just hit the subscribe button and go on this journey with me.